Ladies and gents, forgive me for interrupting you. It's not lost on me that we're actually not starting on time here. We're starting 5 minutes early because we've just discussed that maybe there'll be some questions from you guys. So we thought we'd kick off a little bit early. Welcome to Bonham's and welcome to London Watch Week. It's just unbelievable to have you here, truly. This is something that Lucy, Tom and I sort of conceived a year or so ago, and to be here kicking off at Bonham's is really special. Jonathan Darracott, Head of Watches for Bonham's International, thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Thomas Chamberlain, the editor at the Rake magazine. Good afternoon, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for coming, truly. I mean, God, the turnout's incredible. People at home watching this, and we are recording it. It's hard to express just how grateful we are for all of you coming out, so thank you very much. We are talking about a subject which, well, in the world of watches, there are a lot of subjects that are divisive. We're talking about guidelines and rules for style when it comes to watches. And Tom, being the editor of the Rake, is, and you can see, of course, looking at the man from a Gadsby, straight off the Gadsby set, is a man of fine taste and style.
It's questionable.
So what we wanted to do is bring the world of style together with the world of watches and really see what we could thrash out. We will definitely come to you for questions in due course. So before we get going, Tom, did you put that watch on your wrist this morning before you came up with your combination that you're wearing, or was it the other way around?
I put this on as part of what I knew my outfit was going to be, and we'll get onto the topic of coordination at some point. But yes, so it kind of comes with this particular outfit.
Okay, tell us what you've got on there as well.
So this is a 1989 Rolex Datejust, which is this sort of. I mean, it's sort of the Omni watch. Like, you can literally wear it for anything, and so I'm very, very fond of it.
Jonathan, what have you got on, sir? And what way around was it for you? Was it the watch first, or was it the combination?
For me, the watch comes with the day.
Okay.
So I've got a penchant for world times. So world times is what I have a few of, and so it's actually the original world time made by Tissot in 1950, but it's just beautifully patinated. The dial's got an amazing cream colour, and it's just a complication that I think is well worth having.
Very nice. And proportions are beautiful. So 35 mil.
It's 36.
36 mil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now I'm wearing a 1921 yellow gold Vacheron, but actually I've just picked this up, and we were just talking about this before, so I thought it was worth whipping it out. Now this is not a Tudor, but I've just picked this up from a friend, and many of you in the audience will relate to this, where you may have sold a watch over the years and you've ended up buying it back for a premium, which I've just done. So I've just been to collect a watch I've just bought back from a friend for double what I sold it to. He will remain anonymous, but this is an aluminium Vacheron pocket watch from the 1950s, and I first saw it at Bonham's actually many years ago when there was one for sale here, and ended up buying this one in the Paris sale for Bonham's.
Fantastic.
And I was just showing Jonathan this because there was one that sold at Bonham's very recently.
Yeah, we sold one just a couple of weeks ago, but it was not in as good condition as this. It was missing its pendant, but you can ask to hold this later. But this is unbelievably light because the aluminium company asked Vacheron to make the whole thing in aluminium. So all the plates, everything is in aluminium, and it is the lightest thing that you can possibly imagine. And it's, to this day, it's just an extraordinary watch.
Jonathan, you are a watchmaker by training as well, we have to say. Mm-hmm. So this was sort of the Richelieu meal of its day in many ways, because it's, as you say, aluminium bridges, the dial, the hands,
yep,
the markers, everything
that could be.
I tell you what, here we go. Handle it. Pass it around. See what you think. And it felt right, actually. That and I didn't organise it.
You're never going to see
there
that
will
again.
Be a full. There'll be a full cavity search on exit. There'll be a full cavity search. But sorry, did you say how much I paid for it? Oh God, crikey Moses, we already just met. Don't tell my wife those things. 3,000 was paid, I think, in Paris, ex fees, and I've just bought it back at 6. I think the one just sold for how much?
I'm not absolutely sure. But it was in very poor condition, so it was considerably less.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you were saying the name on the back, the Alconi family, so that one's engraved with Alconi. Who might be linked to it?
Yeah, so I was thinking that because now the company has transferred and it's now called the Alcan aluminium company. So I was just wondering whether it was there was a family. So we'll do some research and find out whether there's a connection there.
And it feels right on a day talking of style and watches to talk about pocket watches, Tom.
Yes. By the way, welcome. You've missed absolutely nothing. You're very welcome. Nothing to catch you up on. It's good.
Tom, let me ask you this. So are there rules when it comes to styling and clothing? Because you talk about this every day, you write about it every day. You've done the Huntsman book very recently off Savile Row.
I have.
The world famous Huntsman tailors. What are the rules? Are there rules for styling and clothes?
Well, I mean, the talk itself is called Rules and Guidelines. I think it's fair to say that there are a lot more guidelines than there are rules, hard and fast. I think that we are in a world where, for me to sort of flog the idea of, men dressing up and making a lot more of a sort of sartorial effort, you really don't want to make it too restrictive. And I think that, so when it comes to watches and style, I think there's a lot of rules out there that I've heard that are total bunkum. Like they are a total nonsense. The one I hear the most is you should never wear a watch to a black tie or white tie evening, because it means that you want to know what the time is, and you shouldn't want to know what the time is because you're having a good evening. I'd say it's total crap. The people have been wearing dress watch. I mean, dress watches have been made. 1917 was when the tank was made. That was a watch that was designed to be worn on formal occasions. It is the classic black tie watch. So as long as wristwatches have been made, watches for formal events have been made. So the idea that you shouldn't wear watches is rubbish. It is, and so there's lots of things like that I find. And I went on the internet before coming here to find what people think the rules are. And it's interesting to sort of see that with a lot of them, it's like, well, I guess I know what you're saying, but fuck it. If people want to wear it, if people want to sort of have a go at doing something different, then great, all power to them. Is my feeling around this.
There is a Breguet designed a pocket watch that on the case itself had the hour sort of wandering, so you could tell the time, but in a montre tac they call it, so tactfully telling the time, and it then featured on a watch I have from Anderson Genève, so you can not turn the watch when you're checking to see how long you've got left to the reception, but you can keep an eye on it just there quietly.
I mean, there is nothing worse than when whatever occasion you're with somebody and they go, sorry, am I keeping it? Do you have to be somewhere because you have looked at your watch and you've been caught doing it? Is
it worse to look at the watch or your phone? Because I find that one really bad when you pick up the phone and you check out the time on there. Because they're not just checking the time, they're probably checking an email coming in or a message as well.
Whether your wife's text to come home or something. I mean, I think probably looking at a watch is a more subtle way of doing things. So I would say that probably looking at watch is better, but
surely you look at photos, you take photos, you look at styling and write about it. Surely you see the combination that someone's wearing, and you see a watch that may proportionally or technologically be out of sync with what you're seeing. Is that cool?
There is a thing there. I mean, I think that when people say. Never wear a dive watch with a suit is one of the things I found on the internet. Never wear a dive watch with a suit. But how many variations of dive watches have we seen over the last 15, 20 years?
Although I would say that having been in the business for 30 odd years, when I first started, it was kind of frowned upon to wear a stainless steel diver's watch with a suit.
Yes.
So it's something that has transitioned over the past 30 years. I just want to add just one little thing. When you were talking about the montre tact, in the 1700s, there was a group of watches that you have a repetition of. So you can press the top of it and it'll chime or strike the hours on, so you can hear it. But it had this really wonderful piece in it, which is it's called a pulse piece. So you put your thumb on it so that it doesn't make any noise, and it taps onto your thumb. So you can surreptitiously go like this and and just know exactly what time it is without interrupting or upsetting anybody.
That's excellent. But on the other side, it was Lyndon Johnson who wore the Vulcain cricket in the White House, and it would audibly go brrr, and that would basically mean meetings ended. So that he would set it to when he wanted the meeting to end. So when it went off, that was it. But no, I think with regards to sort of dive watches and things, I mean, the real kind of the moment things shifted was 1972 with the arrival of the Royal Oak, and I think that when you, as you say, it probably a lot of people would have frowned upon this idea of you wearing anything other than a sort of dress watch with a leather strap with your suit to work or to an event. But along comes the Royal Oak, and one of the first people to pick up on the Royal Oak is a man named Mark Burley. Now, Mark Burley is widely considered to be one of the most tasteful, sophisticated, extraordinary men of all time. He founded Annabelle's, which of course is not the Annabelle's we know today. But he was the man who basically built this world of extraordinary taste and became a kind of sort of benchmark by which a lot of people set their own personal standards. And so when Mark was sort of walking around wearing a Royal Oak with a suit and so forth, people, kind of gave permission for the rest of the world to do the same. In the same way that when he opened George Club in, I think it was 2001, he said that you didn't have to wear a tie to George, which suddenly London professional men had permission not to wear a tie. And it all started from there. And so I think that, when it comes to these sorts of rules, their being there doesn't necessarily mean they need to be abided by. I think that, you might hear about them, but it can take really great, excellent, cool people to play with that rule a little bit.
I thought you were going to say James Bond there. Our greatest export, James Bond, actually changed that paradigm. I mean, I'm not sure if the conversation back then was that you couldn't wear a dive watch with a suit or a jacket, but he's done an awful lot for us.
It's much easier I think it's much easier to wear a sports watch with a suit than it is to wear a sort of dress watch with a sort of hiking gear, or you at your Hydrox events, or what's it called, Hyrox events. Exercise. I don't do exercise. That's on you. I defer to you for these sorts of things. Maybe it's very comfortable to wear your Vacheron doing press-ups. James Bond obviously was a huge. And I mean, I'm sure that even just from a value point of view, the way people view James Bond watches is quite considerable.
It was an extraordinary move by Rolex to allow their watches to be used in movies. It was just, it was a stroke of genius.
Are we going to see Rolex back on his wrist for the up-and-coming one?
Not that I know of. No, I think it's firmly set with Amiga.
I'm not entirely sure. Only because the
ownership... Yes, I'm not entirely sure either, actually. I've slightly...
The ownership has changed, obviously. Amazon have come in. It'll be interesting to see.
You think the door's open to someone else?
I don't know. I mean,
be Tag Heuer.
Vertex. A lot of people want to see Vertex. Gerard Pirago have a lineage with Fleming, and he did include a triple calendar, Gerard Pirago.
Yeah, but can you imagine Jeff Bezos knowing that? No. Can you imagine being like, oh, you know what? Gerard Pirago.
It's got to be in there. Laureato. Could be a Laureato.
I'm sure he's got decent of devices somewhere.
It's highest bidder.
Jonathan, what about the idea of watches being a style thing? Because, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, for the most part, they all look quite similar. The design was pretty round and pretty small. They weren't really designed, the Royal Oak was, of course, and the Submariner designed for function. But generally speaking, the dress watches, you could have covered up the name on the dial, and they all look pretty similar, right?
Frighteningly so. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, there's always been patronage, and people get very loyal to their own watch companies. And there's a horrible, decent snobbery about watches. So if you're, for example, if I'm going to a Patek collector, I will not wear a Rolex, just because of that juxtaposition between the two. So I think I see what you say, that the watches were very similar, but there was always that brand awareness. That's always been there, so that's carried it all the way through.
Can we talk about proportions and sizing? Because that's also a big subject for a lot of watch collectors out there. And over the years, it's sort of a cyclical thing. We had, the Stallone years and Panerai and the big pilots, and then, we're now in a phase maybe where smaller watches are getting the time in the sun.
It's coming down, isn't it? I mean, 38 is actually a wearable watch now. But it's so weird how that zeitgeist takes over. You have this, you put on a watch that is too small. I mean, I put on we've got a Nautilus, a steel and gold Nautilus, and it's the mid-size, and it's just too small for me. But I wonder that in 3 years' time I might put it on and go, actually no, that's all right. and it's just that that fashion sense. So it's ingrained, and you can't get away from it. I mean, there are outliers, there are people who wear all sorts of watches for all sorts of events, and but there is a subtlety, there's an understanding of what works and what doesn't work.
Does it give you any anxiety, Tom, the proportion thing where you might tailor a suit, for example, that things start to change and the styling, the cultural styling changes, and you want to actually adjust? It doesn't feel like it's quite right. I mean, you're quite a traditional man, of course. But you know, for watch lovers out there, there's this idea that maybe, I've got something that's maybe a little bit bigger than where we are right now. It feels a bit jarring. Or you look at the collection, you're like, geez, this doesn't line up quite right. Do you ever look at your wardrobe and think, you know what, that was a jacket that was cut in such a different style to where I am today that I need to think again?
I mean, it's a really good question, but it's impossible to not give an extraordinarily pompous answer to.
Not you, sir.
Well, yeah. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I'd love to be able to have that broader wardrobe, but I think that it is true that if you have a suit made, if you have a tailor will, and certainly if you have shirts made, the tailors and shirt makers will check what watches you wear to understand exactly what proportions they need to have, because remember, sleeves need to taper or they need to just remain a certain way. It's as much down to personal style, length as well, and the watch you wear. I mean, some people really want to show off their watch. Look at Agnelli. You know, he had his special special shirts made so he could wear his watch over his.
How does that feel
shirt.
from a styling perspective? Anything he does right is super cool.
I don't recommend anybody try
Does
it.
that?
Because anybody who tries it is trying to do an Agnelli. And imagine being that sort of, I mean, there's a lot of hubris involved there. Yeah. And so, you know, the great man did it, so let's leave it at that. And, but, you know, Castro wore 2 Rolexes. Don't try that. You know, double wristing, people call it, I think, or is that a watch on each wrist? I don't. Yeah. But either way, maybe not. There is, however, you brought your pocket watch along. I get a lot of.
Where is that pocket watch? Just to be clear.
There it is. Fantastic. Okay, good. Yeah. I get a lot of stick because I wear this chain, and this is actually a lighter. People assume it's a pocket. Yeah, it does work.
Dunhill.
Yeah, from the 1950s. People do assume it's a pocket watch, and I wear it when I wear my morning dress on my waistcoat, and people get very, very upset because they think I'm wearing a pocket watch and a wristwatch. I'm not. But either way, the chain is the accessory. What's at the end of it actually doesn't matter hugely, because you're probably not taking it out. It's just it's creating a sort of a silhouette. It's creating something for people to look at. And so, from a double wristing point of view, you can, I would say, you can take it from me, you can wear a wristwatch and a pocket watch with a chain.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah. On the point of size, it's interesting. I was sort of looking around. Actually, there's a lot of 36, 38 kind of watches that people are wearing right now, or smaller. There's just a lot.
Does it not depend on...
Except you, sir. You're marvellously big.
Not the first time he's heard that.
Thank justice.
Sorry.
We're all friends.
Sorry. What about you, Jonathan, as far as the demographic of people coming in over the years? Have you seen a shift in demographics? As watches have become more popular, have you seen a change in the type of individual coming in and their styling?
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll hear more about this in the second talk, but yeah, when I started, it was pocket watches. We sold wristwatches on the side. So if it was a Patek, we'd think about selling it.
When was that? Sorry.
So 30 years ago.
Okay, gosh.
Yeah. So we wouldn't entertain the idea of selling even a fantastic Longines at the time. Just they were not collected. But that, so yes, that the type of people who come in and buy watches has changed immensely. So at that point, it was mostly people over the age of 60. If you go to any meeting, then the average age was 70 years old, and that has gone down and down and down over the years. And of course, now we've got this great collecting like everybody is interested in watches, and the information that's available to be able to find out about watches it's so out there, so that you can become very well educated. Whereas before it was so niche because you had to find books to be able to find the information. Whereas now it's all there.
And that knowledge was just amongst a few collectors that would come in and have a look and know what they're...
The only way that I would learn about watches was to go to our views and talk to the people who've been doing it for 40 years. And their knowledge was absolutely extraordinary.
Do you think pockets are coming back in some way? Because you guys still sell a lot of pocket watches, and I'm not trying to pump mine up here, but are they coming back?
They're very successful at the moment. So there is a very definite market. I mean, there was about maybe 10 years ago, it was incredibly difficult to sell a pocket watch. Now there is much more of an interest in pocket watches, and I think as people work out that actually there are some pocket watches out there that are complete works of art. I mean, they're the ultimate watchmaker's dream, because the complications that go on in there. You've got perpetual calendars, you've got split seconds, and all of those things, but they're all handmade and they're absolutely beautifully finished. So I think that hopefully there'll be a shift to understanding the work of art behind these things.
I can't help but feel the one thing we're missing is a way to include them in our lives. I have that one on my desk, but there isn't a great stand or something that you can feel that you can enjoy it in a two-way fashion.
People used to. They used to put a pocket watch on a stand, but it's quite fun because if you have a pocket watch on a stand, eventually it'll start to pendule. It'll go backwards and forwards because the balance inside will start to make it rock. So it's quite an interesting phenomenon. Just throw that out there.
And it's amazing when you see the likes of the handmade one from Grubel Forsey getting such attention into the millions, and then you see some of the pocket watches that are genuinely handmade, which is just remarkable for a couple of thousand.
You're saying Grubel Forsey is not genuinely handmade?
I'm 98% of it, I think, is made in Switzerland, just to be clear. No, I don't know exactly. I think it is 98% handmade. Amazing watch, don't get me wrong, and good enough for Mark Zuckerberg. It's good enough for anyone. But you look at these pocket watches and the finishing and the whole thing is done by hand. No CAD, no machine, no computers, just hand.
I guess the other side of all this in the market is to ask how you feel, both of you, about quartz and people making a lot of effort these days on quartz watches. It feels like, Rolex, controversial to say this out loud, Rolex have released a watch which people have argued is inspired by the oyster quartz. But of course there is the oyster quartz, obviously it fetched a lot at auction.
Just not
but then again, there are a lot of brands...
Just not, no.
That's
a side note, that's my view.
That's your view. You can say what you like. Rolex are a wonderful brand. And great advertiser to the Rake. And long may that continue. And so I think that there are brands that you see kind of coming up, like Denison, and who are able to kind of pull from a heritage, but then create watches that are perfectly, people are perfectly happy to wear who are watch lovers. So interesting to see sort of how that is kind of creating some sort of noise within the market.
I mean, the Elegant, the FP Journe right now,
yes,
the black Titanite with the black dial.
You're a big fan.
That particular variation is just eye-watering. I mean,
do you think it takes a sort of major, serious watchmaker like that to kind of make something like quartz cool again?
I think we've always got a slight problem with quartz, and the issue has always been that a pocket watch. So you can get a pocket watch from the 1600s, and it will still run, and you can repair it, you can make it run. Quartz has a finite life.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect in collectors' minds that maybe quartz is for now, but it's not something that I'm going to be able to pass on to my great-grandson, for example.
I'm torn massively because that watch I had one for a bit, and it was all about wearability. It was the most comfortable watch I've ever owned. Wore it doing everything because you don't have to worry so much about causing any damage or doing anything you shouldn't in it. But then in my heart, in the soul, there was just there wasn't that sense of, character.
There wasn't that mechanical.
There wasn't
heartbeat.
that heart. There you go.
Yeah.
And I've been sold entirely by this. I think we all are to some extent. It just was missing that. But amazing design. Amazing design.
Yeah.
And I personally would love the idea of a mechanical version of that. I mean, there is the vagabondage, but again, eye-wateringly expensive. So it's interesting. But you wouldn't necessarily know it's a quartz watch looking at it on the wrist of someone if you didn't know what it was. And most quartz watches you don't either, just because it's a ticking. Or the ultimate Playboy move is the Deadbeat Seconds mechanical watch that looks like it's quartz. So to anyone looking in, they think it's quartz, but actually it's a Deadbeat Seconds. That's a player move.
The True Beat. The Rolex
True Beat,
which was originally called, and I've only found this out just recently, the Metropolitan. And I've seen an advert with a Rolex Metropolitan, but I've never seen it in real life. So so maybe it didn't succeed, and they changed its name to the True Beat. I don't know which way around that happened.
Shall we, guys, if has anyone got any questions out there, it'd be interesting to bring you in on this, because I feel like we've just been riffing on going in all sorts of different directions. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask us? How long have we been going for? Coming up to half an hour. So anyone...
Again, about quartz. So quartz and longevity, like you were talking about, I've bought and sold quartz watches in the past, and I've had issues with them. I've taken them to watchmakers, and a lot of them are reluctant to sort of work on the watches, because I guess he said about the parts being so small and impossible to get. So I think that is another element, because I really like quartz watches. I like to wear them. I think the design's cool. I like smaller watches, so it sort of plays well into that. But I've had quartz watches in the past that's sort of become obsolete in a way, because unless you take it to like a main dealer or whatever, then you can't really get it fixed, and even they might have trouble with it.
But it will always be the case, and most watch companies will stock parts for 35 years after a piece is made, and after that they won't stock the pieces. And as soon as they run out of pieces, they say that's it. We can't deal with it. So it's a sad truth, and even some of the more complicated ones that are more mechanical, they're beginning to be very difficult to repair. Very difficult. The True Beat is a perfect example of that.
I actually had an IWC recently that was a tuning fork, so pre-quartz, and that wasn't working, and I didn't realise how difficult that would be to get serviced. And I hear that what they have to do is they sort of cannibalise, from others, so they just take it and then they have to find what that's working. IWC were actually fantastic though in the service. I've got to say, they did do it and it's still going. But getting it done anywhere else apart from there was tricky. And it's an interesting point, because people don't talk about the servicing stuff very much when you buy a watch. You don't hear about the costs all the time. These things go away for so long and then disappear. And we've done this and this.
Email address.
That's an interesting one actually, Jonathan, because I guess for you 25, 30 years ago, people weren't necessarily that conscious about a watch going back to service and stuff being done to it. The way in which things were done back then, servicing was very different to the way collectors want things done now.
I will call them out. Cartier used to do movement swaps. So they'd get a watch in from the 1930s and they'd do a movement swap for a 1970s movement. And so they completely demolished the whole collecting side of it, but they didn't care. It was to get it, and this is kind of Rolex's and a lot of watch companies' point of view, is that they want to get it back to as close to the original condition as possible. And you have to fight, and most of them are much more lenient now than they were, but you have to fight to make sure that it stays as original as possible, if that's what you want.
You're talking about movement swaps. I mean, that's happening famously with brands like Tissot and the PRX, and we suspect other watches as well. So it's like almost a ship of thieves. When does it stop being the original watch that you had and it ends up being something else? Or
if you take Amiga, for example, because the cases and the movements are both numbered, as soon as they're not what matches in the archives, then the collecting value drops drastically. So it's something if you're aware of it, you need to stop them from doing it.
But that's the realization though, that Tissot is affordable because they've adopted these practices, whereas other ones. I mean, I had an Amiga recently that had a scratch case. They had to change the case.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's a titanium case.
Yeah.
But they had to obviously, burn in the serial number to make sure it matched and destroy the other one. Is it the same watch?
It's a perennial argument.
Triggers broom.
Exactly. Triggers Bonham.
Is there a manufacturer that you have been impressed with their servicing of?
Patek Philippe. Okay, they might take a year to get your, in some cases longer, to get your watch back, but because they have so many of the original parts and they have the watchmakers to be able to make the parts as they were made originally, I think their service department is fantastic. Yeah.
Guys, we should say, if there aren't any more questions, that it is the 100th edition of the Rake magazine.
Yeah.
And you're celebrating that this evening here at Bonham's.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got this... this
Available at all disreputable newsagents.
There you go. And on the back, you've got a wonderful code 1159. Is that, there you go. Code 1159. And
Which was very popular straight out of the gate, wasn't it?
incredibly popular.
Straight out the gate.
It's amazing.
Wasn't
now.
controversial at all.
No, it's amazing now how it's becoming.
It is a testament to, I think, it's very interesting how people settle into a groove. We don't like change as a sort of species, and so something comes up, we instinctively rail against it. But you give it time, you let it settle, and it's also the kind of that sort of damned by media thing. People are very quick to judge and to sort of to dismiss and get rid of if they immediately sort of feel against it, rather than allow something to breathe and find its way.
It's not dissimilar in many ways to Dunhill over the years. Dunhill went through a phase where it wasn't what it was meant to be.
Yeah, but that was bad. To be
bad.
fair, that was bad. Thank you for bringing that up. So Dunhill decided that it was going to be a sort of edgy Balenciaga for Britain, and it really did not do it well. And it was a real shame, because you see it sometimes in sort of big fashion houses with the sort of huge shoes with the even huge sort of soles sticking out the end, very Italian. And that's where they thought Dunhill needed to be going, rather than what they're doing today, which is kind of being a sort of Ralph Lauren of the UK, and I think probably very smartly that they do that. But yes, sorry, I don't want to get off topic.
So no, that's AP Story and the magazine. So there are some mags here if people want them.
Yeah.
There are some mags about. And Jonathan, a couple of highlights of the auction to come this week on Thursday.
Ooh,
for you, maybe one pick, 2 picks, just to people to have a look at.
Of course, the military submariner, which is Rake's military submariner, of which very few are made, and this is a particularly good example. Somebody put a bracelet on it, but they managed to keep the lugs intact. It's a gorgeous one. What else?
Surely that Daytona, the leopard print Daytona, right?
I have a question.
Oh,
could you? Sorry, people. Could you talk about the military submariner? Talk about sort of incorporations of watches in uniforms, i.e., the SAS having their own sort of, but the idea that watches kind of fit within a kind of prescribed set of kit, which people usually have, but then they kind of add these add-ons, like watches. What are the watches that have kind of emerged out of that best? Obviously, the Submariner is one of them, but what else is sort of?
So, the other perfect example is the Type 20,
Yeah.
which you'll all be familiar with Breguet, but it was not just Breguet. So the Type 20 was actually just a configuration that was made by the French military. And there are various brands that did it, Breitling being one of them. And the other ones, of course, there's the Dirty Dozen, which are all basically the same, but made by different makers. And you've got Gallet, the very rare one. And, so yeah, there's always been this connection between, since time immemorial, military timing and watches, but it was the military that actually made the specifications for the watches, rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Seiko did some lovely bits with the Royal Navy, some quartz watches, chronographs that I think are lovely, and actually not a bad time to pick up a sub, like vintage subs now, like.
Yeah,
it's an interesting time to consider one.
It's a good time, yes, yeah. I saw an article just recently saying that the best time to buy a vintage watch was yesterday. as in they've hit the button and they're coming back.
It's useful.
That was our friends at Credit 24 who are looking to sell. Do you know what? I also think we should bring up the Daytona, the leopard print one.
Yes,
because that was on the cover of the Rake a few years ago. John Travolta, I think, was wearing that.
Nicolas Cage.
Sorry, forgive me. Nicolas Cage was
Yeah.
wearing that watch on the cover a few years ago.
Well remembered.
Which is just, it was so shocking that I remember taking note of that.
Should I bring an issue along? So that issue, I've got that issue at home. I might bring
Were
it
you
along
on the
to
set
kind
for
of-
that? Did he choose that?
No,
watch?
I didn't get to for that. No, I'm a family man, Justin. I think flying to Los Angeles to watch a photo shoot happens a bit too
Didn't you just go to Los Angeles for Urban Jorgensen?
I did go to LA for Urban Jorgensen, and that was really fun. 48 hours in Los Angeles is it's a bit much.
Did he choose that watch though? On
It's
set?
his watch.
Oh, it's his watch, yeah.
So yes. So he's a strange, an interesting man, Nicolas Cage. Actually, the celebrity shoots and watches is a really interesting. I had one guy on the cover who he had a. They say he was jet lagged, but he had on his wrist a very, 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 very expensive AP Royal Oak, which it was white gold, I believe, and he. They said cut, and he just went, and then let go, and it dropped to the floor with a very loud clang. So that was an interesting celebrity sort of encounter.
What was the surface? What was the floor?
It was wood, but there's no good surface, I don't think, for that. Then we had Matt Damon got a Chopard Alpine Eagle very, very wet when he jumped into we were out in Cannes, and we went out on a Riva, and he was very jet lagged, and he was actually jet lagged, and Greg Williams, the photographer, was like, we were chatting, we got an idea of him jumping into the water, and firstly to kind of wake him up a bit, but then also just getting really cool shots out of it, because Greg had this sort of waterproof iPhone, which Apple had sent him, and take amazing pictures. And so we got loads of pictures of him sort of diving underwater, but it got the without permission, got the clothes he was wearing and the watch he was wearing very, very wet. Yes.
Was he wearing a watch when he arrived?
No, he was naked. He was entirely naked. And so we just...
He'd been off a shoot for something else
absolutely.
before.
It's Cannes, after all. South of France, they're different there. But where did that come? Oh, Nicolas Cage. So he came along and he had his hat that he really wanted to wear, that he made at Lock. He had this watch that he really wanted to wear. So, I think with when you have celebrities doing things, you don't want to sort of be too prohibitive and say, no, you can't wear this, and no, you can't. So if they have something that's a watch that's their own, that's really, it's a nice thing to let them wear it and enjoy it.
On that note, ladies and gents, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Well done. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, both. Enjoyed that a lot.